Between putting your life on the line for money to sacrificing your friend for said money, Squid Games was ranked the #1 show for a reason. Whether it was attention grabbing or finding out who was going to win in the end, which I feel like most people knew, as Seong Gi-hun was the first character we were introduced to. While we wait for Season 2's release, I'm here to tell you exactly why, down to character development, plot details, and twists as to why this series more than likely caught your attention. One reviewer actually made a 10-point reason as to the reasons to watch this show, with one being the captivating set designs and the plot itself being rejected so many times. Just that alone was enough to stir people's curiosity, and just at the end of the first episode, you understand why. With every episode, there was a drive in the story and a new challenge the characters had to face. To better clarify, Squid Game was a real-life popular game based in Korea in the 70s and 80s, where children divided themselves into two groups, defense and offense, while the offense group is allowed to run everywhere with 2 feet inside the limits of the drawn shapes, and the offense, who remains outside the boundaries, could only hop around on 1 foot. For one of the teams to achieve a win, the offense must touch with 1 foot the small triangle intersection that forms on the head of the squid, whereas the defense must try to push the offense outside of the boundaries. At the start, we are introduced to how this game works, not an exact attention grabber, but I digress. From there, we start at a scene where it would be most important, character introduction, and also quickly learning that the family is poor. And the craziest part is, this series is an entirely different language and it still broke records. It starts off slow, but I think the reason people stayed from the trailer. Seong Gi-hun attempts to make his living by gambling on horses, obviously failing the first time but winning the second. He's greedy and becomes too full of himself. Within the first 9 minutes of the first episode, we are introduced to a conflict right after Gi-hun gets his winnings from the bank and we learn he owes some people money. Even with little time we see him or anyone on screen, you can recognize the goal and obstacle. He has a daughter, of which he attempts to care for but isn't the best father to no fault of his own. This is something that people can relate to in some sense. So now we know who the main character is, we've walked through a day in his life, and then we meet the man in the suit who introduces him to the game. This would be the inciting incident, an event that hooks the viewer into the story and sets everything else that happens in the story. Seong Gi-hun is offered 100,000 won in exchange for winning. He tries over and over again. At this point, he's kinda lost self-control and has nothing to lose anyway. After finally winning the 100,000 won, the man who challenges him also does something that is an attention grabber, naming off a lot of personal information and giving him the invitation for the game. Like Game of Thrones and Avengers, there are a lot of people that enjoy superhero films or action in general. You are always on your toes as the lives of these characters are literally on the line with each game. The suspense of it all and not knowing who will go next, but knowing it will be someone can be exhilarating. And it may even seem predictable, but it's technically not, as the relationship between these characters changes a lot. Waking up surrounded by 455 others with green jumpsuits and people watching them makes you wonder how this whole thing will play out. Even a review from just recently saying, "It was an interesting story and had good progression for its main characters. It was a good story with a steady build-up and intriguing premise for a bingeable series that has me excited to check out its next season." The exposition of the story comes in when the explanation of the game is told to everyone and they understand just why they want to continue. And not only is there a prize to be won, but the prize increases as players are eliminated, building up expectations. In episode 2, the players determine what's at stake between their lives and money to pay off their debts. And the writers were smart to include the detail of selecting players for the game that specifically have debt to pay, giving them a stronger reason to want to play even if their lives are at stake, making it all the more interesting. And honestly, the funniest part is when Seong Gi-hun attempts to describe the situation to the police. As he's trying to explain, you can understand why they don't believe him, and the fact that they let victims go when they wanted to leave makes it seem like not only not believable, but technically legal with a loophole. The moments with Seong Gi-hun and his mother gives the audience all the more reason to connect with him morally. Same with King Se. Connecting and learning about the main characters allows the audience to understand their drive and come to terms that their lives are no better out in the real world, with bills and debts and people after them for a number of reasons. Realistically, they do stand a fair chance during the games, and is fitting for the title for the second episode. In episode 3, of course, those who voted to continue the game come back. Speaking in terms of predictability, we can understand how the story is supposed to unfold. However, even with a laid out plan, there are supposed to be things put in the story that can catch the audience off guard, like bringing in a weapon or having a police officer sneak into the game disguised as a guard. It makes the story less predictable and on the edge of their seats, which is what a lot of people have said about the series. There should be a lot of losses and gains, setbacks, peaks, and trough. And above all, a story should be about people, their dreams and desires, loves and hates, problems and passions. And we see all of that as we get further into the series, along with the portrayal and selfishness with Sung-woo knowing what the game is, and even though he's on a team, still betrays Seong Gi-hun. With every new game comes a new challenge, and by episode 4 comes a twist in the story, making it unpredictable and more intriguing. There's differences between the players and conflict not only within the games but the players themselves. Some form groups for survival and others it's every man for themselves. And it's honestly so interesting the more you think about it, how gruesome the show is, but at the same time being able to be entertaining in its own way. Storytelling has been said that if you write what you know, or write about what you can relate to, obviously this is a unique one, but Hwang Dong-hyuk was pretty creative with this one. The point of the series was to bring forward the reality of South Korean culture. In short, in a world where only money matters, a hell-like horror, the morals of some of the players decrease as more players die. Another brilliant feature Squid Game has is it combines all of its greatest strengths to ensure that we'll care when someone dies. They pace it very slowly, building the tension over time. They use excellent character development and strategies to show us a gradual build and how the characters depend on each other, and of course the cliffhanger helps during the last tug-of-war scene, wanting to know if the characters we have followed so far have survived their plan. Believability has a lot to do with it too. Also succeeding in this category, of course you know in real life that this wouldn't fly. However, the rules for the game help make it believable. The players have a choice in whether to leave or stay. Everything is fair and for the most part to their advantage. As we go into episode 5, we get a better understanding of what the doctor does behind the scenes and how he interacts with the guards, and get a word on who the VIPs are and what the reason is for this game. As crazy as it might sound, the people are actually on their side. We see people hung in the game hall in episode 6, but for the reason of breaking the rules and not being fair. Within the story, the games are compared to the outside world. That's why these players are here, because they believe they have more of a fair chance at quote life or winning the money and paying off their debts. We grow even closer to these characters and even part ways with them, making the series harder to watch. Knowing what we know about Seong Gi-hun, using Oh Il-nam's weaknesses against him for his own benefit was brutal to watch and something probably difficult to see him do considering he has been a team player for so long. This is where things start to get real as fewer players are left in the game. Episode 7 gives us insight into the game within the game, the VIPs. Things heat up as conflict still ensues between characters. The entire thing is for the rich's entertainment, a betting game, foreshadowing Gi-hun's struggle with gambling on horses, instead, humans. The one thing that shocked me the most out of all of this was not even Oh Il-nam being the one who started all of this, but when Han Myo sacrificed herself to get back at Deksu. We get to the nitty-gritty as we get into episode 8. The prize money hasn't even been spoken of or thought of in a few episodes. More things are important as of now. We get the reveal of the frontmen finally and are left with only 2 people for the games. In terms of predictability, you'd expect Seong Gi-hun to win since he was the first character we were introduced to, but winning is not his focus. Even in suspecting who will win, there are still twists, as it is now a personal battle. Different people can have different reasons as to why the series was as successful as it was. From a story standpoint, it had all the key factors. A reason to care about the characters, character development, and realism. So why, in your opinion, did you think this series did well, and what was the best part, and what kept you wondering what was going to happen next?